visit than you've ever had in your life.
I would say that is very true.
I was going to say there's this little thing called the internet that will let you talk to more people than who's just there.
Hey, folks, I've got 12 o'clock. I say that we get started. Welcome and thanks for joining us today for our new knowledge and for National Coffee Day. I hope everybody's had their fill of coffee so far and you're not bouncing off the walls, that you can participate in the session today. My name is Sandy Ratliff. I'm with Virginia Community Capital, and we're happy to partner with the Washington County Chamber of Commerce, the Virginia Highlands Small Business Incubator, and the town of Evenden to present these workshops bi-weekly. And if you haven't gotten our lineup of upcoming workshops, I hope that I will attach those to the email today. Before I turn it over to my co-host, I just wanted to do a couple of housekeeping things. You'll probably notice that we have muted everyone, and that's our objective, is to keep the webinar flowing. But if you have questions for our presenter today, please post those in the Q&A section or in the chat, and we will respond to those during and especially afterwards. Jonathan always does a great job in presenting these sessions, but I appreciate you taking the time to do this for us. So I'm going to turn it over to my partner today, Kathy Lowe. Kathy is the Executive Director of the Virginia Highlands Small Business Incubator. And Kathy, I'm going to let you take it away.
Okay, well, we are really privileged today to have Jonathan Evenden. Jonathan was an affiliate member at the incubator for quite some time. And he is one of our iPhone gurus, and he is going to talk to us about our iPhone devices and, actually calling our attention that they are mini computers. Jonathan is president and founder of Aegis IT. He's located in Johnson City, Tennessee. He's been full-time in the IT industry since 2004. And started Aegis IT in 2012. In the rare moments that he's not in front of a computer, he loves playing board games and watching Netflix with his wife and son. Jonathan, welcome, and I look forward to your session today.
Thanks, Kathy. So, Jonathan Evenden with Aegis IT. We're going to be talking about iPhone tips and tricks. And when I say iPhone, I do mean iPad. They are very similar devices. And in fact, many of the features that I will be discussing here today will carry over between the two. There are a few slight differences between the iPhone and the iPad. For example, the ability to make phone calls is really an iPhone feature. So they pretty much everything I talk about will carry over between the two. The other fun thing is for as long as I've been supporting iPhone, I do have an Android myself. So I had to use my iPad for some of these screenshots. And one of my good friends who is an iDevice fanatic will give me a hard time about the fact that I use Android. So I'll have to send him a link to this video and just show him how much stuff we could do with the iPhone. So real quick, Kathy, do you mind muting? We can hear you on the audio. There we go. Thank you. All right, so just by way of introduction about myself, I started fixing computers in the 90s when I was call it junior high. It's something I really enjoy. It's a passion, it's a hobby, and it's turned into a full-time career. And I'm extremely thankful for that. Started doing enterprise IT and IT consulting in 2005. One of my friends hired me and absolutely have loved it and have never looked back. And we started Aegis IT in 2012. It had been a dream of mine to be able to run my own company. And I'm extremely thankful that we have succeeded and grown since then. Aegis IT, we provide hardware and software support. We sell computers, we sell software, we sell networking. We provide managed IT services, including support for iPhones, iPads, Androids, a lot of peripherals. That landscape has changed substantially since I first got into IT. And I would say it has improved significantly in a number of good ways. Then also we do a significant amount of disaster recovery and prevention. So planning backups, executing backups, checking on backups. And then the first iPhone came out in 2007, and I've basically been supporting it ever since. It has changed substantially Since then, when the first iPhone was released, it did not have the ability to copy and paste text. You could only have one application running at a time. And there were a number of things that would be, we would consider today to be severely limiting, but it was quite revolutionary at the time. So that has been fun to see that progression over the past decade and a half. So real quick, these are extremely popular devices. In America, they make up over half the smartphone population, as per the latest numbers that I could find online. Worldwide, it's significantly less than that. It's about 15 to 20%. So Android devices are more popular globally, but iPhones are very, very popular here in the US. First iPhone was released in 2007. Back in 2007, BlackBerry was the king of business smartphones. At this time, I personally had a Palm Trio. And so that was a great device. I loved my Palm Trio. But we did a lot of BlackBerry support because that was basically the only way that if you wanted to get your enterprise email on your smartphone that you could. So both BlackBerry and Palm are pretty much non-existent at this point, and the iPhone has largely taken over, as well as Android with their products. So even though this device has been available for 14 years, we still get regular questions about how to use various things. We are constantly having to set up enterprise email for end users, and just there's a number of questions that we repeatedly get. And anytime anyone tells me that they have a new device, I sort of have a mental list of questions that I'm probably going to be asked when they need help setting it up. And so basically, I'm going to focus on common questions that we get, and then maybe some other lesser known tips and tricks and things that you might find useful that we definitely have never been asked about. So we'll try and hit what we commonly get and hit things that you might not know exist. And really the focus will be on business use for iPhones, although there will certainly be some ideas that you can use even if you're not using it in a corporate environment. So let's talk about email. Email is still the leading means of communication. And of course, iPhones work with email. When they first were released, that was actually really, really big pain point. It would work, but not very well with Exchange. And we had to use third-party software at the time to be able to connect client iPhones to Exchange servers. In fact, it was a paid app at the time. And so since then, it has progressed such that you can use the built-in mail app, and it will work with any email platform. So you can use the mail app for your Exchange if you're using Office 365 or Gmail or Yahoo or any of the other email providers that are out there. However, mail works reasonably well. However, we have found that many of the email platforms work best when they use their own email apps instead. So it's not that it doesn't work, it's just that it cuts down on our support calls. So we do find that the best use for the end user is if you're installing the applications that were designed by that provider. So like, for example, Office 365 and Hotmail, they have a free Outlook app that you can install from the Apple Store. Gmail has the Gmail app. Yahoo has a Yahoo app. Basically, these are all currently free. And the reason I say use these instead of the mail is because it's just a better setup overall. It ends up being smoother. And while we can get mail to work with Outlook and Office 365, we can get the mail app to work with Office 365, it takes more effort and I have to jump through more hoops. Whereas I tell people download Outlook and they put in their email address, they put in their password, and it basically just works. So that's more an issue with the people who are providing the email. That's Office 365 specifically writing their software in such a way that they really want you to use Outlook, and they make it far easier. Even on my Android, I've got my Android device. I still have Outlook for my two Office 365 accounts. It's better overall. It works better than the native Gmail applications do. So that's just anytime one of our business users gets an iPhone, I tell them right away, install Outlook if they're using Office 365, or install Gmail, the Gmail app if they're using Gmail. And it ends up being better for everybody. Let's talk about backups. The original way to back up the iPhones was to plug in a charger and sync through iTunes. This was a cumbersome process. This was manual. And guess what happens if you have to do a manual backup? It does not get done. So we would get somebody who would be using their iPhone and then it would crash. And because the backups had to be done manually, they wouldn't have data. One particular client, this was 2008 or so, and it wasn't even an iPhone, but it was a device that he was syncing his email and he had to plug in his cable. And so he was traveling overseas and was overseas for about 6 weeks. Well, 5 weeks into the trip, his phone went into the ocean, and the last backup he had was on the other side of the world. So at the time, there wasn't really a way for him to pull down all his information without plugging in his phone and restoring it manually using the cable. As a result, that was a pretty serious hit for him, because the clients that he was dealing with, you didn't just call them up and get their information again. He was a very, very high-end dealer of a particular, he was dealing with very high-end clients. And so at the time, the fact that he had to rely on a manual cable and plugging it up and using a manual sync meant it wasn't getting done. And same thing with what happened with iPhones and iPads. And I am so glad that we have moved away from that model. Instead, we now have iCloud backups for devices, and setting up new devices is now considerably easier. It also means that devices are regularly getting backed up without user intervention. So that manual process is no longer a manual process. You just flip a couple of switches on your settings, and now everything is getting backed up automatically, and you don't have to think about it. And that has been a huge relief as someone who has to manage these devices and support end users. We do very much encourage our clients to set up iCloud and set up backups by iCloud. Now, the only downside is you only get a certain amount of space. So if you're very photo happy, or if you're app happy, or if there's you like to download movies, or there's any number of reasons why people use a lot of space, you might end up having to pay for the better space on iCloud. So by default, if you're just a light user, you won't have a problem with it, and you can use iCloud backup. If you are a heavy user and you take thousands of pictures, you'll probably end up having to pay for it if you want to keep all those offsite. But we very much encourage people to set that up and use it, because the benefits are just absolutely fantastic. Additionally, by having these backups automatically, a system restore really has the most current data. This is valuable if devices get lost or stolen. So in that case, my client with his phone in the ocean, yes, he would have not been happy because he would have had to buy a new phone. But in this case, if this had been now, it would have just been a matter of getting a new iPhone, putting in his iCloud credentials, and just downloading the latest data. That's it. He wouldn't have been in as bad of shape as he was at the time. So if your device gets lost or stolen or damaged, or something happens that you don't want to have happen, then restoring the data to a new device becomes significantly simpler. It also has simplified upgrades, meaning if someone gets a new device, instead of having to back up the old device through iTunes and you have to wait for that period of time, and then plug up the new one, set it up, and then restore through iTunes, and then go through and figure out what was installed, what was not installed, what data is there, what's not data is there. It's just a whole process to have to do the upgrade. Now you just set up the new device, you log in the iCloud, and just tell it to do a restore from this period of time, and it's great. And it has simplified things for us as admins significantly, and I'm really happy about it. So we don't have to use iTunes, and it means less support time for us. So let's talk about printing. This has been something that has increased in popularity. People want to be able to print straight from their iPads or their iPhones. This allows you to print an email or a picture, or sometimes a website or a screenshot, and you don't need a computer. You can just pull up the email, or take a picture and then print it right away. You don't have to spend the time transferring it or downloading it or any other normal steps that you had to do previously. So the reason that this works, or I should say the only way this works, is there is a feature called iPrint, and it must be on the printer. If the printer does not support AirPrint, you will not be able to print to it. So that is a feature that you can specifically look for if you want to be able to print from your phone. In fact, Apple has a complete list of every printer that's compatible. and it is regularly updated by Apple. And I've included a bunch of links to Apple support articles. And so you can go back and look at these if you have a desire to pull up that information. So yeah, it's a very long list. There's no way I could include it all here, as well as the printer list changes on a regular basis. A lot of the brothers have it, a lot of the HPs. It's a pretty reasonably common feature to find. So it's almost to the point where I would expect it to be there rather than not be there, but you still want to do your due diligence and check beforehand. And this is different than how, say, Android prints. For my Android phone, if I want to print to my Brother printer, I have to have a separate Brother printer app installed. There are certain things that are just not there natively, while Apple has it natively there. And so the other important thing to note is that both the printer and the iPhone must be on the same wireless network. So you might have some setup involved. The Apple does try to make it as smooth as possible. And it's not as if you have to really install any drivers, because part of it is that it's AirPrint compatible. That just means that it works, except of course when it doesn't. But the idea is that as long as it's AirPrint compatible, and as long as the printer and the phone are on the same wireless network, it's just going to work, and you're not going to have to worry about installing device drivers or doing a whole bunch of setup. That being said, we still get involved in setup of printers anytime a client asks us to get this working, because it doesn't always work as smoothly as Apple wants you to think it does. So let's talk about hotspots. This is one of the few features that I'll discuss today that is very much more geared towards the iPhone than the iPad, mostly because while you can get a cellular connection through your iPad, it's not a common thing that we see. Most of the time, people are just doing Wi-Fi only on their iPads, because now you're paying for an extra cell line or an extra phone line. It does happen. We do have clients, and I know friends who do that, and that's their prerogative. I got no complaints with that. It just means that you would have, the reason they're doing that is they want internet on their iPad anywhere they go, and that's perfectly fine. It's just that the majority of people that I know that have this, they do Wi-Fi only on their iPads. So this would really not be a feature for the iPad as much. So hotspot means the ability to create a temporary wireless network for other devices using your cell phone as the internet provider. So basically, the most common thing that I do with this is if I'm out on the road and I get a call from somebody, I can pull over, I can set up my cell phone in hotspot mode, I can pull up my laptop, and I can remotely connect. It doesn't matter where I am. It doesn't matter if there's Wi-Fi around me. As long as I've got decent cell reception, I can use my laptop as I normally would in an office. Biggest thing being that 4G is significantly slower than broadband. So you would notice the slowness of the internet, but hey, that's still better than not having any internet at all. So the iPhone, I should say that many cellular providers do allow customers to use their phones as a data hotspot. We call this tethering. However, you would want to check first, because not all of them do. If you're using Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile, that's a pretty easy feature to turn on. If you're using something like Smart Talk or US Cellular or any of the other cell phone providers, I don't know. That would be a question for them. It would be a question if it's on part of your plan. So in general, this was actually not a supported feature on the iPhone. So when the iPhone was released, AT&T had an exclusive deal, and so you could only get it on the AT&T network. And AT&T had locked down the hotspot feature, so they didn't want people to be able to use the iPhones for hotspot. Although, of course, people were able to get around that. You could jailbreak the device. Probably my favorite way that people were getting around it is someone sold a flashlight app that if you hit a secret combination, it would enable the hotspot. And so it was a very popular app until it got shut down by Apple. And so that was quite a creative way to get around the restriction that AT&T had enabled. Nowadays, it's a pretty common feature. It's built right into the iOS. You can just click a few options, which I'll show you on the next slide, and you now have a temporary hotspot. And so the biggest thing that you would need to do is to check with your cell phone plan provider to see if it's a special option. I know that as someone who has Verizon, it's a included feature, but that's because of the cell phone package that I have. I can do hotspot and basically not think about it, because of how much time we spend on the phone, I've got the highest tier of what Verizon has to offer. In the specific way, you would go to settings. There's an option called cellular, and personal hotspot or settings, and then personal hotspot. And you have to allow others to join. And then the name of the Wi-Fi network will be the name of your iPhone. That is something that the first time I did this for a client, it took me a minute to realize that the temporary hotspot had been the name of the phone. So this is what it looks like on the screen. And this is if you need specific detailed instructions, there's a link to the Apple article with screenshots and very specific instructions on how to set that up. You'll see here, there's the option that says allow others to join. You see that you've got the option for putting in a password. And you'll see at the bottom of that screenshot, to connect using this Wi-Fi, it says choose Michael's iPhone, because that's the screenshot that I had available that I shamelessly stole from that Apple support link. And so this is Michael's iPhone, and that's what would be broadcasting when you try to connect to it from a laptop or another device. So locations. The iPhone and the iPad have a number of features related to location awareness and tracking. The Find My iPhone is an optional feature that you can allow for tracking and sharing. I personally turn this off, but that's because my iPad gets very little use, and I basically use it for FaceTiming with clients where I can't do that from my Android. So there are plenty of reasons why you'd want to have this location services turned on. My personal opinion is I have it all disabled, even on my Android. I don't necessarily need the GPS tracking for Google Maps. And for me, it presents a big security. It presents a big security risk. That's my own personal opinion. I have plenty of people that like the benefits of using the location tracking, and so in their case, by all means, use it. That's really no issue. This feature is especially useful for lost or stolen devices. You can keep an eye on your kids or, your spouse if you need to. That's actually been a pretty hot topic of debate, where if you're concerned about someone cheating on you or in a divorce case, the Find My location has been exceptionally useful for attorneys, shall we say. And so that has been a recent trend. And there are plenty of people in news articles about people getting caught because they did not turn off their location tracking and went to do things that the other person did not approve of. We'll just leave it at that. So there are also stories about people using the Find My iPhone to track down stolen devices. In general, the vigilante justice portion would not be a great idea, especially since if someone steals your iPhone and you try and break into their house to get it back, you will actually be putting yourself at risk of getting arrested, because now you're breaking and entering, even if they stole it first. The downside is that if you say you've got location data and you go to the police, they may or may not be interested in going to your location. That of course is subject to where you are, that how busy the police are, and just whatever else. There's a number of factors that go into it. But if you've got your Find My phone turned on and it gets stolen, you now have a much better chance of recovering it than if you don't. There's also a detailed overview of how to set these up and what are all included. You've got that Apple support article. It's a very long page, so there's no way I can include it on a slide. There's even more that's available with this feature than what I've got here. One other fun thing, you can also set notifications for when someone leaves or arrives at a location. So if your teen child, for example, is going over to a friend's house, you could have a notification if they get there. You could have a notification if they leave there. You could have a notification when they get home. There's any number of options that could be enabled. This is an optional feature, and it must be set up by both parties. You can't just randomly go on Kathy's iPhone and start tracking her and see where she's going. It would have to be mutually agreed upon and have to be set up in both devices to have this working properly. And you can get an alert if someone leaves, arrives, or is not at a specific location. And this is pretty handy when you're waiting for somebody. Let me there's a screenshot of it. So you can see how you've got your options for notifications. You've got several different locations. You can add multiple locations. You can change what type of notification you're getting. And there's a full, that support article has a full list of all the things you can do with location tracking. One of the things that my son did when his grandparents were driving out to visit, when my wife's parents were driving out to visit us, they turned on the location tracking, and he was basically following them on his iPad, and you can see it on Google Maps with their little pin it was driving down 81. So that was a fun thing, and he was having a kick out of watching them do that. So he could message them as they're driving past certain towns and ask them, about the towns and what they're seeing there. So that was pretty handy. So let's talk about texting. Apple does make it possible to receive text messages from your iPhone in other locations. So, for example, you can sign in on the same Apple ID and receive text messages on your iPad, your iTouch, or an iMac, the desktop or laptop. And that gives you more flexibility to be able to send and receive text messages, even if your phone is not on you. The forwarding does need to be set up, and each device needs to be authenticated. So you can't just randomly start getting text messages from someone else or break into someone else's text messaging. It has to be authenticated. There's a whole process to make that happen. But it does give you flexibility, because now you can receive and send text messages and iMessage messages, even if you're not in front of your phone, or if you'd rather be typing from your computer, for example. Remember, importantly, Apple does save your messages in iCloud. So please keep that in consideration when sending personal information. Credit cards, passwords, we'll just leave it at personal pictures, and illegal activity. You'd be surprised, or maybe if you've been on the internet enough, you wouldn't be surprised at the kinds of things that have been caught, because people sent messages with any of these things in text, and now it's getting recorded by Apple, and they're getting caught as a result of this. In fact, Apple does scan all your pictures in iCloud for certain activities, shall we say. And the big brouhaha from a couple months ago was when they announced that they were going to start scanning your devices even if it didn't back it up to iCloud, and that had some serious backlash, and I think they've backed off on that for the time being. Basically, they have known hashes of child pornography, and so they're scanning iCloud for images that match that particular hash, so that way they can use it for law enforcement. The uproar is that they might be scanning your devices for this now, but what's to keep them from scanning your devices for pretty much anything else that they want in the future? So you can see specific details on how to set that up at that Apple support link. And it's great because it gives you options to be able to do more. For example, I type much faster with a keyboard than the virtual on-screen keyboard with two thumbs. My accuracy is terrible when I'm typing on my phone. So if I had the option to type with my keyboard, that would be a huge win for me. Unfortunately, Android does not support that at the same level that Apple does. All right, let me give you some actual questions that we get asked. They're not important enough or they're not big enough topics to justify entirely separate slides, but we do get physically asked these questions all the time. So if I get an iPhone now and later switch to Android, do my purchases and programs transfer over? And the answer is it depends. So if you get an iPhone and you start buying a bunch of books on, say, Audible, well, Audible has applications for both Android and iPhone, and those purchases are tied to your Audible account, not to your iPhone. And so if you were to switch to Android, install Audible, you could now have access to your library, but that's because Audible as the provider makes that possible. So there are games that will only work on iPhone. There are games that will only work on Android. There are applications that will only work on iPhone. There are applications that will only work on Android. So my follow-up question is always, what specifically are you trying to do? Because I don't know. You have to tell me what you're trying to do, and then I can look it up. Or if I know off the top of my head, then I can tell you one way or the other. So something like Netflix or Amazon Prime, it's all streaming content, for example, and they both have applications for Android and iPhone. So that would work fine. But to say, do they directly transfer? The answer is no, they don't directly transfer. You're dependent on the vendor to be able to provide access to both platforms. How often should I upgrade my iPhone or iPad? The answer is it depends. Depends on what your budget is. Depends on if you're chasing features. There are people that I know that will get the newest, regardless of how much it costs. And when the last one came out, all I can say is it must be nice to be able to do that. There are people who will hold on to their iPhones until they're no longer being updated, or they have problems working. It really just depends. It depends on how much money you want to spend. It depends on if there's a feature that you want, because they try and do release new features for different versions and different platforms and hardware. And so that's going to be a you question rather than a me question. And will my iPhone work with blank software or platform? And the answer is it depends. I hope you see that there's a trend here. The question will be, is there an App Store app for it? Right now, the App Store is the only legitimate way to install applications on your iPhone or your iPad. There are other ways to install applications on your iPhone or your iPad, but it does involve jailbreaking or rooting your phone. And so by doing that, you void your warranty and you could install malicious software. And there's a whole host of reasons why doing that is not particularly, we don't generally recommend it, although for people who are more device enthusiasts, there's certainly a great option. And it does give you freedom over your phone that you wouldn't get otherwise. But the real question is there an app for it? Is it in the App Store? And if it's not, then the answer is no. Although there are other ways you could do it, such as through a web browser and use the web browser as sort of a wrapper for an application. But if, once again, it's all dependent on the vendor to do that. Can I install apps without using the Apple Store? No, not without jailbreaking the device. So I guess really it depends. We do give out the answer, it depends, quite a bit, because it depends on the context, and it depends on the application, it depends on what you're trying to do with it and how you want to use it. So it represents a philosophical difference between Apple and Android. Apple takes the walled garden approach, meaning you have to play by their rules to get your application installed. They vet applications and they regularly remove applications that do not meet up to their standards. And so the idea that they want to have is that if you install an app from the App Store, it's going to be legitimate and it's not going to harm your device. That doesn't always happen, but that's mostly the case. Android, on the other hand, is more like a free-for-all. You can install whatever you want to. They do make the Play Store available to make it convenient, but you can install applications by plugging in a cable into your computer and using the A to B installer. And like, there's all sorts of ways you can side install applications and your phone will let you do it. And Google tends not to care. And that's it. It just represents a big philosophical difference. So let's talk about some general tips and tricks. In addition to common questions we frequently get, here are some other lesser known features. And I don't recall a time I've ever been asked about any of these, but they do exist and you might find a use for them. I had to go look up some of these specifically. So these are not necessarily features that I've used, but they're pretty interesting. I thought they might be helpful. The device does come with a measuring app. It's a built-in app called Measure. It's on iPad and iPhone. Measure lets you calculate distances between points or measure the area of an object. I wouldn't use this necessarily for exact or precise measurements because they are, and they even say in the terms and conditions when you open it for the first time that this is really an estimate. However, it's pretty precise. And I found it to be pretty accurate when I was messing around with it in preparation for this talk. It's also supposed to have a level, but I couldn't get that to work on my iPad, so that might be a feature limited to iPhone only. So it sometimes has difficulty auto-recognizing the outline of an object, but you can manually adjust the lines. So for example, I've got an ottoman and it's all one color. And so I was trying to measure the surface area of the top of it, but because it's all one color, it picked up the whole thing. But it doesn't matter because I can just draw the line back up and now it's where I want it to be. And here's two examples. So the first example is this. It's sort of small to see, but I took basically a coffee table and I did a surface area calculation. So it shows you that it estimates the base of the table to be 27 inches and it estimates the width of the table to be 4 feet. And so then it does a square foot calculation of the table. I thought that was pretty cool. You can also measure distances between individual points. So I basically picked a point in the center and tried to measure it to one of the edges at the bottom, and then picked that same point and tried to measure it to one of the corners. And you got, once again, if you're doing carpentry or something like that, you need very precise measurements, grab a tape measure. But this would be pretty handy for making quick and good estimates if you're trying to put a piece of furniture or figure out the space of an area. Hiding photos, you do have the option to hide photos in your photo library. Before, if you took a bunch of pictures, they would all show up in your photo stream, whether you wanted them to or not. Apple recently created a new folder called Hidden that will keep images from appearing in your general photo stream. So that way, if you want to show some photos to somebody, but you've got maybe some photos you don't want other people to see, you just put them in your hidden, and then they can just swipe through all your photos, and those hidden photos won't show up. They're easy to retrieve. You just have to look in the right folder. So it's not like they're hidden and you have to go through, 3-letter agency government type mechanisms, Mission Impossible style, to get them back. They're just there. You just click in the right spot and they're there. They just do not show up in your general photo stream. And I'll let your imagination run wild as to why people might want this. So what does that look like? So I logged into my iCloud account. You can see I've got my 2 photos there. It's actually the only 2 photos I have are the ones that I took for the measuring app. But there's now this folder that's called Hidden. Once again, it's more to take it out of the photo stream. It's not some hacker style. Now you've got to be 300 IQ to try and find the photos. They're just right there. They're just not going to show up when you're scrolling through it. Writing on email attachments. So you have the ability to edit email attachments. Well, when I say edit, I mean draw on them. So you can draw or write on email attachments using the markup button. And this is particularly fantastic. So for example, I was dealing with a client who's out of state, and we're trying to figure out connectors for his computer. So what he ended up doing was taking pictures of the back of his monitor and taking pictures of the back of his computer, and taking pictures of a couple of other things. And then he was able to make notes directly on the picture and point to how he had cables plugged in. And I found that to be particularly helpful. Instead of me having to guess where things are plugged in, it's just back on the computer, and he's going, okay, this cable's going here and this cable's going here. And it was just right there on the picture. So that saved me a ton of time, and it took out the guesswork. You can then save it or send it, and it's helpful for highlighting a particular object or explaining a portion of the picture. So I was very happy to see that. It also has a basic document scanner. The Notes app has the ability to scan documents. Once again, I say scan, like scan. It's not truly scanning in the same way that a regular scanner would, but it's basic, but it'll produce a different, like it's not just taking a picture. Taking a picture is going to produce a JPEG or some other format, and it's going to be treated differently than a note that is a scanned document. You basically open Notes, you create in your notes, and there's a camera button at the top. If you click that, you get 3 options, and one of them is scan document. And so what that does is it did some basic text recognition, and it just treats it differently than a picture. I found that to be pretty interesting, especially since I have to scan a lot of documents. You can then send it or save it or whatever you need to after you've scanned it. Just keep in mind some of the limitations. Watch your storage space. We do get asked about this quite a bit. Once you buy your iPhone, there's not really options to upgrade the internal storage. So you pretty much have to buy something in advance to anticipate how much storage you're going to need. But there's been some third-party options that exist for USB storage. SanDisk has this really interesting looking USB plug that one end plugs into the iPhone or your iPad, and it says Lightning connector, and then the other plugs into your computer as USB. And even if you upload your data to the cloud, it still has local storage on your phone. That's pretty important to remember. So one particular client had 25,000 photos that was trying to be synced. And yes, that meant that there were 25,000 photos on the phone, even though they're trying to be synced to iCloud. And it took over a week to get all those synced just because of how many photos, the size of the photos, and just a number of factors. So that even though the photos were taken, even though they're in the cloud, there's still the component where it has to sync or download to the phone. And so you have to be mindful of that. This is particularly relevant for people who like to take pictures, or if you're installing every game from the App Store. This used to be more common if you wanted to carry around movies. You'd have to transfer them, and you're talking gigabytes per video. Nowadays, you can just stream everything with Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, Sling, whatever. So that the need for carrying around a couple 100 GB of movies if you want to bring a bunch of movies with you is now basically gone. You just have to have good internet. But that was very much an issue back in the day, especially when they started and there wasn't the streaming options that we have now. Other important things, you can manage your storage space by electing not to sync all your iCloud data, or you can move a large number of photos or videos off to the phone. There's also some wireless storage options. So you can sync your data using a wireless hard drive. You can also use the built-in storage allocation program to determine where your data is used. It's in settings, or there's some third-party applications you can plug up along with your computer. So wrapping up, these devices have been out for quite some time. We still get a lot of the same questions, and we still deal with the same issues. There are more features and options available, and they could not all be covered. I mean, we could go weeks and just to hit every single feature that was available. Apple does a decent job of having good knowledge-based articles. If you're trying to figure out how to use a particular feature, they do have a lot of information online that you can easily find. And I didn't have a particularly hard time finding those knowledge documents to include as links on those slides. Hopefully this will provide just some basic information on how to use your iPhone, and then maybe some features you didn't know about. So are there any questions at this point? Because I'm trying not to do information overload. There's a lot more that we could talk about.
I know I have some questions, and I hope that our viewers will post on the Q&A or in the chat questions they may have. But Jonathan, this happened to me last week with the new iOS update on iPhones and iPads. I did an update, and on my iPad, I can't use a app that I've had for years. And it's actually where I manage all my security cameras.
Oh no.
And that is no longer in the App Store.
Oh no.
Because that app developer is they quit.
Yep.
They quit this app. And
yep.
I'm scared now to even do any other updates on some of my other devices because I need that app working, because I've not found anything that could replace it. Now, if something was to happen and I go crazy and say I'm getting a new phone, can I do an encrypted backup on my laptop and then hook the new one up and do recovery? And would it have all the same things that I have now, or will it try to go to the App Store and re-download all my apps?
So we'll go with the patented IT answer of it depends. The reason I say that is because if you buy a new device, you're not guaranteed what iOS level it'll have. So if the newest version, like in this particular case, the latest version doesn't support your camera app, well, any new device is going to have that same iOS level. And so if it's not supported on the latest, then a new device is not going to support it, and it'll actually block the install. So you will not be able to move that app. You would have to find a device that has an older version of the iOS to be able to transfer it. And then you can transfer it using the backup and restore through iTunes or iCloud. It's just you are at the mercy of Apple when it comes to security and what apps can and can't be installed. That's what we call it the walled garden. And I would say that's why a lot of people do like Google. Although Google has been known to block and remove applications from the Play Store and block and remove applications from your devices. However, that happens far less frequently than with Apple.
Great. I know there's several apps that I use when I was on the road a whole lot. I used an app that would track my mileage for me because I got reimbursed with that. And that was very helpful. I also have a scan biz cards. If you were doing a lot of networking events, this app, you can just take a picture and then it'll automatically detect all the text on it and put last name, first name, all of that on there. And that saved a tremendous amount of time. But I'm one of those that I do a lot of my work on my iPhone and my iPad. It's just, it's handy. It's usually right there. And I can do so much more than I can on a laptop. I just find
that's generally the trend. I mean, especially for website development, if you don't have a mobile responsive website, like if you don't have a mobile version of the page, you're basically killing your traffic. because of how many people are either smartphone only or smartphone primary. So you've got an entire group of people that might not even own a computer, but they will have a smartphone. And it's because they can do so much from the smartphone that there's less that requires a computer. Now, in my case, because of the nature of my work and just how I work, I would not be able to function without a laptop or a desktop. I could not do everything from my Android that I need to be able to do. Android or iPhone, it wouldn't matter. There's just things that absolutely require a computer for me. So I will pretty much always have a computer as long as I'm doing this. But my wife, for example, primarily like 95% of what she does, it's on her smartphone. And that's just her prerogative. And that she finds that easier for her to do that.
Hey, Jonathan, Kathy Lowe. So you mentioned the scan feature on the notes.
Yes.
I just went to my notes. I was playing with my phone while you were doing that. I don't see where you can scan a document.
So there's a camera button at the top, at least on my iPad has version 14. And so I don't remember when they added that as a feature. But if you create a new note, there's a camera button at the top. And if you press that, you'll get a drop down with 3 options. At least I did on my iPad.
Yeah. So is that on your iPad or your iPhone?
Yeah, it's on my iPad.
Yeah. I've got the iPhone 12, but I don't see it on my phone on those little dots.
That might be one of the few things that's the difference between iPhone and iPad. Like I said, I only have an iPad, so I was not able to double check a couple of these things on an iPhone.
Okay.
I've done that before, and I've just taken a picture of something. And Kathy, look at the double dots. I saw it a minute ago, and we had Margie Douglas was sharing that. Click on the 3 dots. But we do have a question I want to address regarding the iOS 15. It seems to have a greater battery drain after updating. Some blogs have mentioned the drain also. Do you recommend any setting adjustment to improve the battery drain specific to the iOS 15?
Yeah, you are sort of at the mercy of Apple. That's pretty much the answer for everything iOS related. If there are some settings within there addressing battery drain, there's a battery option, and you can basically tell it to use less battery. It's a setting that will shut down background apps. You can also make sure you close background apps, and you can turn down the brightness. Things like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth will absolutely drain your battery no matter what device you're using. So for example, if I'm on my phone, and if I compare the amount of time I get when I'm using, say, Bluetooth audio versus if I'm on the phone, the Bluetooth just absolutely kills it. It just has higher battery drain. So that would depend on how are you using your iPhone or your iPad. Do you have it hooked up to external speakers, through Bluetooth? Do you have it hooked up to your earbuds or AirPods, or do you have it? I don't have an easy answer other than to say it depends, because it really depends on what you're using it with. How much apps do you have running in the background? Is it on standby most of the day? Are you actively using it? Are you watching video? Are you streaming? Because all of those things affect the battery drain. But yes, they do have some specific settings to try and help address the battery drain. But the fact that it is draining battery faster between 14 and 15 is really a programming thing. And there's not really any option. Because here's the other fun part. You cannot downgrade. Once you upgrade, you cannot downgrade. It's a done deal. So if you don't like how 15 is handling, too bad. You're using it at their pleasure. Basically.
Yes, and Mr. Bowling, I've allowed you to be able to ask your question.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I was just wondering if it was specific to iOS 15. I read in one of the blogs to disable what all goes as far as iCloud backup, that would be the biggest battery hog in iOS 15. I was wondering if you had anything else that just specific to 15 that it does that previous versions did not do, and just, basically in 15 only. And I do agree with you, Bluetooth will drain it, but isn't it nice to have Bluetooth speakers in different rooms of the house when you want them?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I know. It's great. It's like, for example, my car is pretty old, and so I found it more convenient to get a little tiny Bluetooth speaker that I can just constantly have plugged into power source rather than spend all the money to try and get a new audio deck or something. So if I'm in the car, I'll hook up my phone to my Bluetooth speaker, and then I can listen to music or an audiobook or something. But it kills the battery if I don't have it plugged up to my power charger when I'm in the car. So as for 15 specifically, I'm sorry I don't have a better answer. It's brand new, and so they're still trying to deal with things. So that's about the best I can say. Like literally, it's entirely dependent on Apple to fix some of these problems. And it's not the first time. It's not the first time that they've had battery drain problems. Like it's not the first time. There was even a lawsuit about it because of batteries on older versions, and I think it was 7. It was a while back where they released a version of iOS, and older devices started draining the battery faster, and it turned out there turned out to be a lawsuit because what was happening is people were paying to upgrade their devices when they didn't have to, especially since the update was specifically targeting battery drain. Like Apple specifically was causing the batteries to drain faster, and then trying to convince people that the right answer was to upgrade.
And Mr. Bowling, I just watched a YouTube video yesterday about turning off these settings on iOS 15, and it was I was amazed because there were some things just like in location services that I had turned off before the update, and they somehow came back on after the update. So you might want to go back, and I'll be happy to attach that video link to the follow-up email that I'll send everybody from today's session that you can watch. Same way with, I don't want some retail vendor following me, tracking where I am going geographically. Yeah. There's other things that you might want to look at even on your Safari, and just having a bunch of Safari screens up and you have that playing in the background can drain because it's always going out. And I will say that depending on if you're not on Wi-Fi always and you're using your data plan, you could get eat up with your limit. So yes.
Yeah, those are all things to take into consideration, and it's really on a plan by plan basis and a person by person basis. I mean, I've got a data plan that with Verizon that I can use whatever I want to, and so I don't even think about it anymore. But that's because of work and the nature of my work, and that would certainly not be a fit for a lot of people. It's required for me, basically, after having spent way too much money on overage charges.
And I'd love to know what some of the most helpful apps are for some folks in their business. As I mentioned, I even use Gas Buddy, of course, to find who's got the cheapest gas. If Food City's beating Sam's Club today, I use that a lot. I use, as I said, where I have security cameras, I have apps that I manage and take care of those. So there's so much out there that you can about run your business just on this little old device that you carry around in your pocket.
Yep, that's great. It's a huge change from even what BlackBerry was able to do 15 years ago. Did you ever have a BlackBerry, Sandy?
I did. I was happy to see it go, but I couldn't imagine going back to anything. And I have iPads and iPhones, so I will be an Apple fan, although I still use a PC I don't have but maybe someday my ship will come in. I was just wondering if Nita or Kathy, do y'all have any other questions?
I don't. I'm still playing with my phone and my notes. You know how obsessive I am.
Fantastic.
I know, but now that I know Jonathan can give me some answers, I feel sure I'll be contacting him one question at a time.
Fantastic. Yeah, just hit me up anytime.
Yeah, I've been on the go, and someone sent me something they needed me to sign. I've got use an app called Sign Now or DocuSign, either one, and you can bring that up, sign on the line, and send it out. And that's it. It's no more the days that you had to print it off, sign it, and then rescan it and send it out. Thank goodness.
I'm still playing around with everything that Jonathan has talked about. So I just want to say thank you. He always brings such great information to us.
Excellent. I was trying to get it to measure the bald spot on my head. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, I've got you beat for now.
No.
Yeah, I lost a bunch of stuff. I didn't think about it, but my iPad email address when I was on the town council was clo@evendenva.gov. And I had all of these PowerPoints and
Oh no.
and what is that app we use, Sandy, to make
Keynote.
Keynote? I had all these presentations on Keynote, and I lost every
Oh no.
one.
Oh no.
Because when they turn, if you that, I guess that's something people need to think about, is if you dispose of that email address, you've lost a lot of those apps.
Yep. Everything's tied to your email address. So it's
Yep.
extremely important to remember when you're setting that up.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan, once again, you have given us some great information, and I think the contact information for Jonathan is at the beginning of his presentation that Sandy's going to send out. And we thank you for being involved with New Knowledge and for all of the things that you do to help us promote small business here in Southwest Virginia.
Well, we love coming and doing these for you.
Thank you.
And I just want to put in a plug for our next session, which will be on October the 13th, and it's going to be focused on managing leases and rental agreements.
Oh.
And it's a good subject for everybody in business to make sure you're doing the right investment for your company. And that will be Anthony Farnham with Matt Smith Realty will be leading that session. So I hope you can join us. As we stated earlier, I plan to share the link once we upload it to YouTube that you can watch the Jonathan's presentation again. But I'll also send you his slide deck so you have that information. And as well as I'll send you the YouTube link for the information that I watched on the iOS settings and things you need to watch out for.
And just to remind everybody, any new knowledge that we have done since 2015, you can go to the Virginia Highlands Small Business Incubator homepage, and there's a PDF with a link to each and every new knowledge that we've done since 2015. So they're easy to find. You can read the titles and you don't have to scroll through all that stuff on the YouTube channel itself. And you can read the titles and watch the videos. We've got some great information on there. 6 years is a long time to archive videos, but we have archived all those videos.
Or you can go to YouTube and just look for new knowledge and start subscribe to our channel, and you'll see all of those, because we started doing these and I guess recording those in 2015. So there is a lot of content up there. And of course, we're doing these every other week. So we keep adding to it, and just get you, if it's 2:00 in the morning, and get you a piece of chocolate cake and milk, and watch a new knowledge video on anything that you can think of, from how to manage credit card processing to cyber insurance to Jonathan just did one a few weeks ago on Microsoft Outlook. There's so many features on the Outlook on your devices that it's amazing. So we've probably covered about everything you can think of that you need. So thanks again for your time and for joining us, and I hope to see you again in a couple weeks. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.